You're talking about corruption. Nigeria is not the most corrupt country in the world. Actually, I would think it's the United States. And of course, you guys in England, where all of our money has been pouring since the days of slavery up until now. But I just want to quickly also respond to the fact that we are happy that Nigeria is no longer one of the 10 most corrupt countries in the world by perception. I think that process of actually determining corrupt country is also rigged against third world countries. Considering the fact that monies that are stolen from our part of the world are passed through Western banks, particularly in the UK, US, and Switzerland. So when you're talking about corruption, we should actually be accusing Switzerland as one of the most corrupt countries in the world, because monies that are stolen from poor people from the Congo, Nigeria, everywhere in the world passes through these secret bank accounts. And it's unfair to continue to say that we are the most corrupt. But we have a duty to challenge our leaders and challenge the primitive accumulation of wealth that's been the situation in Nigeria. And again, I just want to say that the reason why Nigeria was not part of the 10 most corrupt countries this time around was because the former regime has stolen so much that there's nothing left to steal again. And as a result, there's no way Nigeria could have become one of the most corrupt countries in the last 2 years. Let me tell you, and I'm speaking extempore today because I believe in the paperwork reduction law, so I don't do a lot of paperwork, that something happened in 2015 before President Muhammadu Buhari took over power. He had to rush to the UK. You know,
your website.
Okay, yes. He had to rush to the UK for one of those secret medical treatments before he took over power. And who was sitting somewhere close to him? It was the woman who used to be the most powerful minister in Nigeria, Mrs. Desiani Alison Madueke. And by way of corruption and the way it works, it turns out that she knew that Buhari would be traveling and wanted to be on the same flight with Buhari, and got one of Buhari's people or somebody in the presidency had leaked to her that Buhari was traveling. And she had not handed over power, but wanted to make sure that there was a discussion or conversation that happened between the president and herself, maybe to buy some immunity for herself, because it had become clear that they had stolen too much, that the money they stole and kept in rooms and used in buying properties was flowing out of the windows. As they will say in our culture in Nigeria, they killed and buried, but the dead body, the legs of the dead body is sticking out of the grave. So this woman traveled with Buhari, but something happened that's very instructive about corruption. They said when Buhari got on the plane, he had just one handbag placed in the overhead compartment. But our madam had about 12 bags. And when it was time for Buhari to put his handbag, there was no space for it because she had occupied all the overhead compartments in the business class where she was sitting. Eventually she left, came here in the UK, complained that she had cancer, and never went back to even hand over power. It turned out last week that she had bought furniture worth $100 million from monies that were stolen within 5 years, and shipped them not to Nigeria, but to different houses and apartments that they were purchasing for her here in London. And this is the reason why I say you guys are probably more corrupt than anybody in the world. But this is our own issue. Let me explain to you. We started what Professor was describing to you here today some 10 years ago. How did we start? There's a guy named James Ibori, who was the governor of Delta State, that we'd been monitoring when we started our website, SaharaReporters.com. And we monitored and found out I had a $2.8 million apartment or house in London here. But he was living in a gated community. And we couldn't figure out how to get to the house. And Kayode Ogundamisi was sitting there, was in London at that time. I called him up and said, Kayode, how do we find out what is in this house that Ibori had? And he said, well, I don't know what to do, but we'll try. So he took a camera, went there, and he had to make some moves. Some of them will not reveal here today to you, and got into the house and met Ibori's mother-in-law in the house. And I think he pretended to be a mechanic and went to the garage, pulled up the garage door, and there was a Bentley sitting down there that has never been driven before. So we were the first to blow the whistle on Ibori, and we followed through until he eventually came and spent some time here in jail, some 13 years. I don't know how you do your jail calendar over here. In 6 years, he was back in Nigeria. But it wasn't Ibori's people that got me angry about how he was received back in Nigeria. It was the head of the State Security Services, DGSS, who said publicly, after meeting with Ibori, that our son had returned back home. And that's the DGSS appointed by President Muhammadu Buhari, who gracefully brought Ibori back home. In fact, if you saw the picture of Ibori when he arrived home, there were policemen, Nigerian policemen, jubilating upon his arrival to his house in a place called Ogara in Delta State. So I'm saying all these things not to poo-poo what Professor is saying, but to say that there are internal contradictions within the Buhari's regime's fight against corruption that makes you sometimes want to puke, that makes you feel that there's a lot of unseriousness or incompetence in the government. And of course, as you know, I guess after Buhari came to power in 2015 and saw how much had been looted, he himself became sick and had been in this country, in the UK now, for almost 90 days, with his jet parked somewhere in Stansted Airport, accruing about £4,000 every day in parking fees. He has not disclosed to us his ailment, and we know that that is costing Nigerians a lot of money. But it is not the discussion about Buhari's head that I'm here to do today. Hopefully before we leave the UK, we'll be able to take him back with us so that he can resume back to work. But to also say that over time, using social media, using modern technology, we have been blowing the cover of corrupt people in Nigeria almost single-handedly with a number of citizens. As a matter of fact, we had found out as of 2005 that Nigeria's current Senate president had a $4 million house here in London as well, that had a golden door knob to it. We went there, took the pictures. Nothing was done about him. There were monies that he looted from a bank known as Societe Generale Bank and transferred again to the UK through the normal channels that you guys get money from, and purchased a lot of properties here. What did they do with him? They rewarded him with the number 3 position in Nigeria. He's Nigeria's Senate president today. We found houses bought by a former governor of Edo State. His name is Lucky Igbeneghu. Lucky Igbeneghu used beneficial owner to buy his house. In fact, it took us almost a month to figure out the owner of that house. It was when they were throwing away mail out of the house where we had been laying siege for several months that we found a gym membership that had his name, because otherwise he didn't buy the house in his original name. When Lucky Igbeneghu was caught in Nigeria and punished, he was fined 3 million naira, to the extent that he felt that it was so ridiculous, he went to the trunk of his car and paid the judge right there the fine. That was the punishment that Lucky Igbeneghu had. Of course, nothing else was taken away from him. You can imagine the toad who had, if you see Lucky Igbeneghu, anybody knows him, that he's not even health conscious, to the extent that you think that he will be a member of a gym. But they buy gym membership regardless. But there's another thing that is also very important that you should know, is that when you talk about how money is stolen out of Nigeria, it is not only in buying properties or buying cars or yachts alone. There's a lot of investment in the education of their children in this country. You can hardly go to a top UK university, or even nursery and primary school or high schools, that you do not find the children of Nigerian elites, thieves, investing a huge amount of money that they are stolen from children, public education and hospitals in Nigeria, on their children. In fact, there's no Nigerian official, including President Buhari, who believes in Nigeria's education system. Buhari's children are going to school in this country. The Senate president just came and openly celebrated, the graduation of his son in Nigeria. He governed a state called Kwara for 8 years. They don't have a public university to which they can send their own children. The same thing applies to the emirs, the obas, and everybody. They have no belief in Nigeria. But what we've been doing, and I've been going back and forth, is to use social media as a tool for exposing this, to the extent that I feel like Nigeria owes me a lot of money in back pay when it comes to whistleblowing, because we started what we call whistleblowing today, and we do it even almost the best, to the extent that in some cases the kind of work we do forces the hand of government to take action against the corrupt elements in the society. And sometimes when they do, we also follow judges who are involved in criminal bribery to expose them, to ensure that somehow Nigerians get justice. But what is most important in what we do is an African culture that is known as public shaming. Because sometimes the only justice that the Nigerian people get against these criminals is the ability that we have developed to name and shame them across, particularly, social media. I used to laugh about something that when we started, when we write about these public officials, they don't care. They have become immune to, negative publicity or publication. In fact, most of them own all the major newspapers in Nigeria. But social media has done something that is psychologically powerful. When you write about them now, their children, friends in the universities where they send them around the world say, oh, I saw your dad's name. They say he's a thief in this country. And usually that is what is most painful to them. When they will call me to threaten me, which they do all the time, they say, if you had written about me, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't mind. But why would you write about me? And, my son just called me from London that they say I'm a thief. As Professor said, they said, but how much did I steal? Or sometimes they say, am I the only thief in the place? And my encouragement to them is that if you are not the only thief, tell us about the other thieves. And quite honestly, they whistleblow against themselves too. And they say, well, the house next to my house is also owned by another governor. So why is it that you're only talking about me? As you know, it is not only in the UK that they have houses. There's a favorite neighborhood near Washington, D.C. known as Potomac, where they also have choice properties. But these days, they are no longer buying properties too much in the UK or Europe. I guess Chinese money and Russian money is just too much for them to compete. They have moved to a place known as Dubai, where they buy huge amount of property, and those places you actually can't track them. Or they go to China, and I said to myself, if you give me a Chinese bank account, I cannot translate it. That's if there's one at all. So we have to develop other means of even translating sometimes bank accounts, finding and ensuring that all of this is exposed thoroughly. I would tell you, sometimes it's very painful when you see some of these cases that are being talked about now. We have been tracking Desiani from the first day she became the Minister of Petroleum Resources. Not only were we tracking her, we were exposing some of her dalliances with some of these young people, because a lot of them are also romantic. She was romantically linked with our former president. We said it. We put it out on social media. And sometimes people say, well, you are disclosing too much about these people's lives. But today, you have heard that everything we've told you, both in pieces or in well-written long-form stories, have become true, to the extent that we can almost disclose today that Desiani by herself might have stolen almost $50 billion. It's not all the money that they steal that are invested in real estate. The biggest part of it is also invested in elections. Because the biggest business in Nigeria, the biggest industry, is public office. So anybody who wants to become successful in Nigeria will go after public office. And in getting public office, you have to have a huge war chest. And huge war chest allows you to bribe election officials, police. It allows you to carry out assassinations of your opponents whenever you want and get away with it. And then allows you to grab power. And when you grab power in Nigeria, I mean, power is power, as you can imagine in the rawest form. You know, you own not only the streets, you own the church, you know, because the pastors are praying and praising God in your name. In fact, you can design your own God such that that particular God, the Christian God or the Muslim God in Nigeria, does not even see your corruption, even though he's an over-powerful, all-encompassing God that punishes at the slightest provocation. The God in Nigeria does not punish the rich because they are designer gods designed by their pastors or imams. So this is why Nigeria is such a very, very powerful place for corrupt people. Power is concentrated too much in the hands of a few individuals. And the same thing goes for wealth. To the extent that when you talk about the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, for example, the EFCC in Nigeria, which is trying its best, the body has been emasculated, crushed by these powerful people, you know, to the extent that the chairman of the EFCC is more afraid of lawmakers who are criminals. We did a small thing recently about Nigerian governors who were formerly governors, who are now in the Nigerian Senate, who had corruption cases. If the EFCC were to walk into the Nigerian Senate and pick out all the corrupt people, there will be nobody left in our Senate. That's the truth. All of them, because the Senate had become the retirement home for corrupt former governors. If you just walk into the place and arrest everybody who has committed a crime, there will be nobody left at the Senate except the security guard at the place. It's the home of some of the most corrupt criminals in the world. And in doing the kind of work we do, we have to appeal to not only people in government and shaming them, but there's also a very laborious education process for young people in the country. The concept of wealth for young people in Nigeria is so difficult that it's, even after we're done with all the criminals and jail them, you have to do a whole reorientation and re-education of young people. Young people have come to believe in instantaneous wealth. And they don't believe anymore in hard work because there's nobody in the last 20 years in Nigeria that have come into real wealth who has worked for it. You know, and I'm saying it openly here, and you can just show me one. You know, you can mention, well, the richest woman in Nigeria who was a hairdresser who got an oil block dashed to her. Is that hard work? Or the one who says is biggest billionaire in Nigeria who live off of, you know, not paying custom, not paying taxes, you know, granted land wherever he wanted, you know, sold to public institutions that belong to the rest of us at, you know, for peanuts. Those are not people who have worked hard for wealth, but those are the people that the young people believe in. For you to do a great movie in Nigeria, you have to get a house in Ikoyi that is owned by somebody who didn't work for the house. And when somebody sees the movie, it's like, wow, you know, this is a great house. But nobody asks, who's the owner of the house? Interestingly, the owners of the house are given credit at the end of the movie, if you pay attention. And sometimes that's where we get some of our own investigation from, credits of movies. I don't watch Nigerian movies, but I watch the credit. Just like I used to read a newspaper made in the UK known as Ovation magazine. I hated it, but it was the first place where we found all the houses that were bought, you know, with corrupt proceeds in the UK, because the governors used to love to come here, call Dele Momodu to come to their house. They'll do parties, and we'll see the address there. And the next day, we'll buy from the land registry in the UK those property information. Most of the property information you have now, we actually purchase. I purchased them personally from the land registry in the UK. which is very easy to do, but it made me broke for a while because I just kept sometimes, we just kept buying and buying and buy property information, and we look at it, and it's very difficult because they were using, as you know, beneficial owners to purchase so many of these properties. But when it comes to Nigerians, even if they buy a house in another person's name, we are so loud that somehow we will let you know that the house belongs to us. Because we are going to come to your neighborhood and have a big party and have everybody wear their big boo-boo and drive nice cars, and somehow you know that the house belongs to a Nigerian man. And we get information from our brothers and sisters across the world in telling us how this has been. What is interesting, and you must know, I don't want to spend too much of your time, is that if Nigeria were to be run the right way, if the Commonwealth was not looted with the kind of impunity and wickedness that's been happening in the last 50 years, Nigeria could have been one of the best countries in the world. There's enough money in Nigeria. It hurts me badly when I hear people in the US or Europeans talking about, we give you aid, every year. What they call aid is peanuts. I don't think that the UK had given Nigeria up to $1.5 billion in the last 5 years in aid. I don't think so. But it's such a big deal. But you have a woman who is currently in the UK, Desiani, who had stolen just that amount from 4 oil exporting companies. Just 4. We're not talking about several other ways that she has squandered money or had frittered money away from the country, or had mismanaged and embezzled. And she's not the only thief, by the way. I agree with whomever said that there's a lot of them, including the former president and his wife, who shamelessly went to court to defend money that they caught with her, and she couldn't explain how it was. Not only was she shameless in doing that, they would send people to the court every other week that the case came up, well dressed, to support her, a solidarity group. She had the effrontery recently to attend an anti-corruption book launch in Abuja, where this is true, where she was part of the high table of people launching this book on anti-corruption. Of course, the book was written by one of the most corrupt senators in Nigeria, named Dino Melaye. That's probably some of you don't know him, but I'm assuming that we are talking likely to a Nigerian audience here. So the question is, Prof, you mentioned that a lot has been done and there's not been scandal in this government. I disagree with you. It is your government that the secretary to the government cut grass somewhere in the north with millions of dollars. I think 200 million just to clear grass. And you also made another presentation here that I want to dispute, that illegal recruitment. In fact, Sahara reporters found out that the Buhari regime had the central bank governor illegally recruit children of all the top government officials. And we brought out all their names and nothing was done. Why am I saying that? Just also to challenge you on the fact that a lot of the scandals in this government that were brought out or had been reported, nothing had been done about them. In fact, we can safely say that, and we're frustrated to say so, that there's a special group of people within the government who enjoy immunity and protection from searchlight by the government agencies. I like your group because you're not afraid to speak. Professor Sage is my favorite. I read him all the time. But I think there's a disconnect between what your group says in the public and what the government itself does internally. We had a governor who is from the north who was caught with 500 million naira from the bailout funds that were given recently. He also reportedly has a $3 million hotel that he's building in Lagos. But guess what? He was one of the people selected to come and meet the president who's on medical vacation in the US. That's the governor of Zamfara. So when you have criminals like that who are currently in government and you provide them the kind of access that they have to the president. In fact, we heard at the point that he was almost getting married to the daughter of Mr. Buhari. You are sending the society a wrong signal that you encourage criminals like this to hobnob with the head of state, who you guys have always claimed is a claimer. Nobody knows that, because up to today, your presidency hasn't disclosed his assets publicly to us, even though he promised to do this. But as you can imagine, people, if I want to start counting to you here, so many of these scandals that we have found, even in the government of the day, we will be here till tomorrow and will still not be able to end this. But let me say that I have a little position on the whistleblower policy of the government. I don't think that even if people bring wrong information, they should be prosecuted the way they are being prosecuted. And I also think it's wrong to put the whistleblower unit in the Federal Ministry of Finance. That is like asking cats to be guarding, rats. The most corrupt ministry in Nigeria is the Federal Ministry of Finance. So if the Federal Minister of Finance is stealing, what would the whistleblowers do to go to the whistleblower unit in her, in her ministry and say, look, madam, you are stealing, and we found out? What do you think the whistleblowers there will do? That case would never be treated. So the whistleblower unit should be a separate and independent entity of government that is not even controlled by the president or anyone. Let it be a very, very well protected independent entity. You can't put a whistleblower unit in the Federal Ministry of Finance. That doesn't make sense as far as I'm concerned. All of Nigeria's money is stolen mostly through the Federal Ministry of Finance. So it doesn't make any logical or legal sense to place the most important revelation unit in that place. So that's just my suggestion on that. Finally, I want to continue to encourage people to send us information wherever you find it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't give Prof information. You should send your information to the whistleblower people, but you are most likely to get your issue publicized if you get to Sahara Reporters than if it goes to the whistleblower unit. And I can assure you that sometimes the people in government may not prosecute, but our platform will prosecute to the fullest anybody who is found wanting and stealing in Nigeria, including the president when we catch him. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It would not be Omoyele Sowore if it was not punchy. That's what I expect of him. And we do need the kind of robust check that his brand of journalism provides for a developing country like ours. Without it, like I said, we happen to have a respectable government comparatively to our past now. But it will change. So we do need this brand of journalism and this brand of activists. And I would, without much ado, allow you to ask just a few questions. I think 3 questions which he will be allowed to pick. We'll meet outside this venue, and there are other papers too. You can also cross-reference your questions and all that. So please, go on.
Yes, please.
Thank you very, very much. I was just wondering, okay, so I'm a lawyer. So I have 2 major concerns.
Yes.
One is the descriptives. To call somebody a thief,
Yes.
when they have not been prosecuted,
Yes.
I have major problems with that. I understand the language, and I'm sure the idea is for maximum impact.
Yes.
So, 1, do you worry or do you get concerned about being sued by, all of these people? Primarily because at the end of the day, there are two tensions. So there is the tension to ensure that I think what you do, and with respect to Sahara reporters, is naming and shaming, alternative justice, if you like. So there is that tension, and of course, everybody is entitled until they have been proven guilty by a court of law to what we call their own respect, howsoever the respect is described. So I'm just wondering how, when you make your decisions on what to publish, the terminologies, how you go about it, how you balance those two interests.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. One of my area of work is terrorism.
Yes.
And I know that for people that have been reading your paper, from what I have done in the past, I know that if there's any area where there's so much corruption, it's in the security infrastructure in Nigeria. What is your opinion about that? And if you have an opportunity, take into consideration now people in here, to speak on the issue of corruption and Nigeria's security infrastructure, what would be your view on that?
Thank you. I'll take one more. Ajay, you owe me the list of the people you have. We'll talk later. Let me take the question from the lady, and I'll take your question. Just allow me for yes.
Again, I just want to ask you, so much concentration on this, but don't you think that people also get the leader itself? Now, what is our responsibility to also educate the people to be less corrupt themselves? She's talked about the youth, which, their values have gone out of the this today. So it has to be balanced, because you cannot achieve a society you want if you all just say it's the leadership. Yes, but how about the citizenry themselves, and what are you doing about that to enlighten them to be better citizens?
Ajay, quick question.
Even though I've not seen you in 22 years, I don't need to ask you why you're doing this. We are classmates, we sit together, we sing shows together. You don't look it. You don't look it if one looks at you, but the work you do is amazing. And once again, I don't ask you why you do it. But when do you think, and how do you feel when the things you do, the impact is not what you expected? And it's interesting to know you still do it without making much difference in the situation on ground.
Thank you. Let me.
Omoyele, can I exercise some organizer's privilege here?
Yeah.
What do you feel about that horrible song that was composed for you by Dino Melaye? I really would like. What do you want to say about that?
I'll just say to you that there's a way that things work in reverse order. You probably haven't composed the song, but if you ask between me and him, who is having a Jeko here now, you would know, and that's my answer. In terms of impact, part of it is emotional for me, and the emotional part of it for me is like to know that Nigeria has such great potential and it's in ruins today. And I just can't deal with my conscience if I didn't do anything about it. We were in university together, and I was 22 years old when I became a student union president of the University of Lagos. And I was hoping to leave the University of Lagos in 1993 to go and settle down, get married and have kids. And what happened? 1993, Babangida came and annulled an election that stalled my life to today. And I said to myself, we just have to fight the war. I saw the elites at that time, and it's part of the reason why I don't look at Nigeria from the prism of ethnicity. The Yorubas, Hausa, Igbo, everybody that could participate in the looting, they were just taking care of themselves. It is when they get caught that they remember where they come from. But when they are stealing, they speak one language. I don't know what language it is, but they are united by corruption. So the impact is massive, but I can tell you that some of these things you don't even see. The impact of what we do, you don't see. It's not as intrinsic as you want to say. But if you had a Nigeria that somehow in 2015 could have a change of leadership based on the reporting and the mobilization we did on corruption, even though that might be misplaced now, going by what is happening, you cannot say that we haven't had impact. Because in our lifetime, there's no time that Nigeria has ever even had a free and fair election that led to change of government, except in 1993, and that didn't lead to. So there's impact, But again, I say that the fact that ordinary citizens like us can put the fear of what they call the fear of God in the heart of powerful men and women in our country, that's huge impact. To the extent that the Senate President of Nigeria had to go to a court in Ilorin to get a libel judgment against me. That's an impact. Because if it was before, he wouldn't have even cared at all. People have just looked for a way to shoot up everywhere, and it's not as if they won't do that. But, impact is in different, grades and shades and forms. And I can tell you that even though we are not fighting enough, the fact that we are fighting is bringing about a lot of impact. And I think there will be more, because social consciousness has come in a form that I've never seen before. That people can even use social media to challenge constituted authorities in different places. There's been some kind of level playing field as well between the citizens, the government, and in some ways they are being forced to react and concede some ground. That is impact. But has this brought the kind of society I want? Definitely not. The issue of security and terrorism, sir. One of the things we did in the last 5 years was actually to be collecting information directly from soldiers on the field fighting Boko Haram, on the corruption that was going on in the army. We were the first to publicly publicize information, and that's to remind Prof again that there's scandal in this government. The scandal relating to the army chief of staff, chief of the military army chief, who had gone to Dubai to buy, some properties with money. The money was being deposited in a property company in Lagos by another colonel in the army, and we provided the evidence. Buhari did nothing about the army, the military guy. That's a scandal that's been there for more than 2 years. So terrorism is in Nigeria as a result of corruption. You can imagine that Boko Haram, which is a group of ragtag army, can be defeating the Nigerian army that has over $2 billion to purchase weapons with every year. But none of you here can say that we did not tell you that there was corruption going on in the army. We have been reporting about it. We were even reporting as soldiers were running away from Boko Haram and presenting the video to the public. But the response of even some of our friends in social media in those days are, why are you always reporting negative things about Nigeria? Why don't you, it's because you hate Jonathan and all of that shenanigans. But now we know better because, army generals, civilians stole over $15 billion. According to the Vice President of Nigeria, this is not Sahara report, and just use it in buying properties in Dubai, in Abuja, in the UK, in the US. They bought cars with it and bought all kinds, anything that money could buy. Like I said, they bought God where they could find cheap one and lorded it over us. But now we've known the truth. The last question is about calling somebody a thief and the use of language. I know you're a lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'm very legally aware that the threshold for calling somebody a thief is not exactly what you need in court. I've been sued 4 different times in the US for libel, and the judges agree with me that my language is very flowery. It's very good enough to describe people who steal from my country 4 times, and I've won all the 4 cases. The first one was by the guy who later became NAFDAC DG, Paul Ori. When they sued against us, they offered him that job. He went there and did exactly the same thing, stole. There's a guy who was helping them sell properties, embassy properties in Washington, D.C. and New York. He sued me. We were in court for 4 years. the judge said something that is very important. U.S. judge, not a Ilorin judge. So, because he alleged that there was malice because we published what his sister also wrote that he's a thief. And the judge said, if your sister knows that you are a thief and did not inform the public, she's doing injustice to the public. And if the media got something like that from your sister, warning the public that you are a thief, and the media did not publish it, they are also doing a disservice to the nation or to their readers. And on that basis, the case was summarily dismissed. Of course, I was also sued by Obanikoro when I exposed his stealing of money that he used in rigging the Ekiti election, what we call Ekiti Gate. Over 7 billion naira was stolen to use to rig the election for one person. Lawyer, what do you want me to call that person? You know, a priest? You know, he's a thief. You know, so again, I'm just telling you that the dignity that they want from us in reporting can only be gotten if their hands are clean. And when you're talking about judges, you know, counsel, there are not a lot of good judges in Nigeria. So we'll stay in court. Governors that were charged in 2007 for corruption, Odious or Kanu is one of them, they are still in court. The case has not been concluded. The Chief Justice of Nigeria is friends with the Chief Thief of Nigeria. They don't hide it. They go to the same church, they go to the same wedding.